In the dusty archives of antiquity, a forbidden text speaks of a time before the Great Flood. This is the Book of Enoch, a manuscript suppressed for centuries, yet it carries echoes of a much older story. High above the cradle of civilization, watchers descend from the heavens, bringing forbidden knowledge to humanity. At the same time, in the vast plains of Sumer, ancient clay tablets describe the Anunnaki, those who came from the sky to the earth. Are these accounts describing the same cosmic event? Today, we peel back the layers of myth and history to examine a narrative that was once erased from the official record. We look at the intersection of fallen angels and celestial visitors, searching for the true origins of human civilization. The truth waits in the shadows of the past, hidden within pages that were never meant to be read by the uninitiated. The landscape of the Judean desert is a study in desolation and silence. Here, the sun bakes the limestone cliffs into a pale, skeletal white, and the wind carries the scent of salt from the nearby Dead Sea. It is a place where time seems to have folded in upon itself, preserving the secrets of a vanished world beneath layers of dust and shadow. For nearly 2,000 years, one of the most provocative and terrifying records of human history remained buried in this wasteland, hidden away in ceramic jars within the darkness of a cave. This is the Book of Enoch, a text that was once as central to the spiritual life of the ancient world as the Book of Genesis. Yet it was deliberately excised from the light of day, branded as heretical, and left to the mercies of the shifting sands. The story of its rediscovery is not merely an archaeological triumph. It is the restoration of a lost perspective on the origins of civilization itself. For centuries, the Western world knew of Enoch only as a brief, cryptic mention in the Old Testament. The 5th chapter of Genesis records that Enoch walked with God and then he was not, for God took him. This sudden, unexplained departure from the mortal realm hinted at a narrative far more complex than the scribes of the Bible were willing to disclose. It suggested a man who had seen things no other human had witnessed, a man who had crossed the threshold between the terrestrial and the celestial. While the official canon of the Church remained silent, rumors of a complete version of Enoch's memoirs persisted in the remote highlands of Ethiopia. In the 18th century, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce ventured into these isolated territories, searching for the source of the Nile. What he found instead was a community of Orthodox Christians who had never abandoned the book. To them, the Book of Enoch was not a dangerous myth but a sacred history. Bruce returned to Europe in 1773 with 3 copies of the Ethiopic text, effectively reintroducing the world to a narrative that had been suppressed since the 4th century. However, it was not until 1947, in the caves of Qumran, that the absolute authenticity of this work was cemented. Among the fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, researchers identified Aramaic portions of the Book of Enoch. This discovery proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the book was not a late medieval invention, but a genuine product of the ancient world, read and revered by the very people who lived during the time of the Second Temple. The scrolls reveal a world that existed before the Great Flood, a period the Greeks called the Antediluvian Age, where the boundaries between the divine and the human were dangerously thin. In the high-budget documentary of history, the Book of Enoch serves as the missing link between the myths of the ancient Near East and the theology of the Judeo-Christian tradition. It paints a portrait of a pre-cataclysmic society that was not primitive, but rather possessed of a sophisticated and perhaps extraterrestrial influence. To understand why this book was feared, one must look at its central premise, the descent of the Watchers. According to the scrolls, Enoch chronicles the arrival of 200 high-ranking celestial beings who defected from the heavenly realm. These beings, known as the Watchers or the Grigori, were not mere spirits. They are described with a physical presence that suggests a tangible reality. They descended upon Mount Hermon, a towering peak on the border of modern Lebanon and Syria. Their arrival was not a peaceful mission of guidance, but a direct violation of cosmic law. They looked upon the daughters of men and found them beautiful, leading to a biological and cultural contamination that would forever alter the trajectory of the human race. The narrator of this history must pause to consider the weight of this claim. If the Book of Enoch is to be taken as a historical record, it suggests that the ancient gods of Sumer and Babylon, the Anunnaki, were not mere figments of the imagination. There is a chilling resonance between the Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, and Enoch's account of the Watchers. Both traditions describe a group of advanced beings who established a hierarchy on earth, interbred with humans, and introduced technologies that were far beyond the natural evolution of the species. In the dusty workshops of the ancient world, the influence of these beings was felt in every craft and every science. The Book of Enoch provides a terrifyingly specific list of the forbidden knowledge passed down by the Watchers. It was not agriculture or basic medicine they taught, but the arts of war and vanity. One Watcher named Azazel taught men how to forge swords and shields, introducing the concept of organized slaughter to a world that had not yet known it. He also taught women the art of cosmetics, the beautifying of the eyelids, and the use of costly stones, creating a culture obsessed with appearance and deception. Others taught the movement of the stars, the secrets of the clouds, and the signs of the earth. This was a scientific revolution spurred by a non-human intelligence. The text suggests that the development of human civilization was not a slow, uphill climb, but a sudden vertical spike fueled by outside intervention. This is the forbidden history that the official records sought to erase. The Church Fathers of the 4th century, such as those at the Council of Laodicea, viewed these accounts with deep suspicion. The idea that angels could possess physical desires, that they could father children, and that they were responsible for the technological advancement of humanity was a threat to the burgeoning doctrine of the time. They preferred a universe where the lines were clearly drawn, where God was in his heaven and man was on the earth, with no meddling intermediaries to complicate the hierarchy. But the scrolls do not lie. They speak of the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of the Watchers and human women. These were the giants of old, the men of renown. In the narrative of Enoch, these creatures are described as ravenous and destructive, consuming the resources of the earth and eventually turning on humanity itself. The world of the antediluvian age becomes a nightmare of genetic experimentation and ecological collapse. The harmony of nature is shattered, replaced by a chaotic struggle for dominance that ultimately forces the hand of the Creator. The rediscovery of these scrolls in the 20th century forced scholars to reevaluate the entire foundation of Western mythology. If Enoch's account is even partially rooted in a physical reality, then the ruins of the ancient world take on a different character. The massive megalithic structures of Baalbek, the precision-cut stones of the Giza Plateau, and the sophisticated astronomical alignments of the Sumerian ziggurats begin to look less like the work of primitive tribes and more like the remnants of a lost global civilization directed by a higher power. The neutral observer must ask, why was this specific narrative so thoroughly buried? The answer may lie in the power of the story itself. The Book of Enoch does not present a world of simple morality. It presents a world of cosmic conflict, where humanity is a pawn in a larger game played by beings of immense power and questionable intent. It challenges the notion of human exceptionalism, suggesting that we are the products of an ancient and possibly ongoing intervention. As we look upon the fragments of the scrolls today, preserved under glass and protected from the air that would turn them to dust, we are looking at a mirror of our own anxieties. We live in an age of rapid technological advancement, of genetic engineering, and of an increasing awareness of the vastness of the cosmos. The echoes of the antediluvian world are growing louder. The stories of the Watchers and the Anunnaki are no longer confined to the realm of myth. They have become a haunting parallel to our contemporary reality. The recovery of the lost scrolls of Enoch was not an end, but a beginning. It reopened a door that had been locked for 1700 years. Beyond that door lies a history that is as dark as it is fascinating. A history that suggests our origins are not as humble as we have been led to believe. The journey of Enoch into the heavens, his conversations with the divine, and his observations of the fallen ones provide a roadmap to a past that was systematically erased from the collective memory of the West. As the sun sets over the cliffs of Qumran, the shadows lengthen, stretching across the caves where the truth lay hidden for millennia. The scrolls have spoken, and the message is clear. The history we know is only a fragment of the story. The rest is written in the stars, in the stones, and in the forbidden pages of a book that refused to stay buried. We are only now beginning to listen to the echoes of that ancient world, a world where the Anunnaki walked among men, and the secrets of the universe were traded for the souls of humanity. The rediscovery of the scrolls is the first step in a long trek back toward the truth of our forbidden history, a path that leads directly into the heart of the mystery of the Watchers. High upon the jagged, snow-capped peaks of Mount Hermon, the air is thin and biting. This ancient limestone massif, straddling the modern borders of Lebanon and Syria, stands as a silent witness to a moment that precedes recorded history. According to the Book of Enoch, it is here that the boundary between the celestial and the terrestrial dissolves. The sky does not merely hold the stars. It holds the Watchers. They are the Grigori, a high order of angelic beings whose original mandate is to observe the unfolding of the human story without interference. They are the sentinels of the firmament, eyes that never sleep, stationed in the peripheral realms of the divine. Yet, as the text describes, a profound and catastrophic shift occurs in their collective will. They look down from their exalted height and find themselves captivated by the inhabitants of the earth. The narrative of the Watchers is not one of a slow drift into error, but of a calculated communal rebellion. Their leader, a being of immense authority named Semyaza, gazes upon the daughters of men and perceives a beauty that is both alien and irresistible to his kind. He realizes that to act upon this desire is to forfeit his place in the heavens. It is a crime of cosmic proportions. Semyaza speaks to his 200 subordinates, expressing a fear that he alone will be held accountable for this great sin. He anticipates the weight of the coming judgment, but his companions do not recoil. Instead, they propose a terrifying solidarity. They resolve to bind themselves together with mutual imprecations, swearing a series of dark oaths upon the summit of Hermon. They agree that none shall turn back from this design, and all will share in the consequences of their descent. The imagery is cinematic and haunting. 200 celestial entities, shimmering with a light that is not of this world, stand on the frozen earth of the mountain. They are abandoning the timelessness of the spirit realm for the entropy of the material world. This is the descent from the firmament. It is a physical and spiritual migration that mirrors the foundational myths of the ancient Near East. When we look across the Fertile Crescent to the clay tablets of Sumer, we find a striking resonance. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Like the Watchers, The Anunnaki are depicted as powerful, intelligent beings who occupy the spaces between the gods and humanity. The Book of Enoch provides a more intimate, perhaps more cautionary, perspective on this same arrival. It portrays the arrival not as a benevolent mission, but as a breach of the natural order. As the Watchers move down from the slopes of Mount Hermon and into the valleys where humanity dwells, they do not come empty-handed. They bring with them the secrets of the heavens, a forbidden curriculum that is destined to accelerate human evolution at a staggering and dangerous pace. This is the moment where the history of technology and the history of the occult intersect. The text meticulously lists the names of these fallen instructors and the specific disciplines they unveil. Azazel, one of the most prominent and controversial figures among them, teaches the art of metallurgy. He shows men how to extract ores from the earth and forge them into swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. This is a pivotal transformation. The world of the early humans is one of stone and wood, governed by the rhythms of nature. Azazel introduces the age of metal and, by extension, the age of organized warfare. The narrator notes that the introduction of the blade changes the human psyche. Conflict is no longer a matter of mere survival or tribal skirmishes. It becomes a lethal science. But Azazel does not stop with the tools of death. He also instructs the women in the arts of vanity and seduction. He reveals the secrets of making mirrors, the use of antimony to beautify the eyelids, and the creation of costly gemstones and coloring tinctures. The Book of Enoch suggests that these are not merely cosmetic improvements. They are seen as a distortion of the natural human form, a way to manipulate perception and incite desire through artificial means. The other Watchers follow suit, each acting as a dark patron of a different branch of knowledge. Amaziras teaches the secrets of the sorcerers and the cutters of roots, introducing the world to the complexities of herbalism and pharmacology used for both healing and harm. Armoros reveals the art of resolving enchantments, a form of counter-magic that implies a world already becoming saturated with supernatural influence. Barkial brings the knowledge of the stars, instructing the people in the science of astrology. This is not the simple navigation of the night sky, but a complex system of divination that seeks to tie human destiny to the movements of the celestial bodies. Kokabel teaches the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, and Shamsiel the signs of the sun. Even the moon has its instructor, Serial, who reveals its cycles and the hidden powers associated with its phases. To the modern observer, this list looks like the birth of science and art. We see the foundations of astronomy, chemistry, and medicine. However, in the context of the Book of Enoch, this knowledge is considered illicit. It is characterized as a theft of divine secrets that humanity was not yet ready to possess. The Watchers are accused of revealing the eternal secrets which were preserved for heaven, which men were striving to learn. The atmosphere of the earth begins to change. The simplicity of early human existence is replaced by a sophisticated, albeit corrupted, civilization. The present tense of the narrative captures the mounting tension as the world becomes increasingly unrecognizable. The Watchers take wives from among the humans, and the resulting unions produce offspring that the text describes as giants. These are the Nephilim. The presence of these hybrid beings introduces a physical and ecological crisis. They are consumers of immense proportions, devouring the labor of men until the resources of the earth are exhausted. When the humans can no longer sustain them, the giants turn their hunger toward the humans themselves and toward the animal kingdom. The world is descending into a state of predatory chaos. The parallels to the Anunnaki narratives are once again impossible to ignore. In the Mesopotamian accounts, the Anunnaki are often seen as creators or overseers who organize human labor to serve the needs of the gods. They build cities and establish kingship. In the Enochian tradition, this same activity is viewed through a lens of moral decay and cosmic rebellion. The cities built with this forbidden knowledge are places of violence and godlessness. The earth itself begins to cry out against the bloodshed and the perversion of its natural laws. The Watchers, once the shining guardians of the heights, are now the lords of a darkening world. They have traded their celestial inheritance for earthly dominion. They walk among men as kings and gods, worshipped for the secrets they possess and the power they wield. Semyaza, Azazel, and their brethren have created a society that is technologically advanced but spiritually bankrupt. They have bridged the gap between the divine and the mundane, but in doing so, they have invited a catastrophe that threatens to undo the very fabric of creation. We must imagine the perspective of the average human living in this era. For them, the arrival of the Watchers must have seemed like a miraculous advancement. The sudden appearance of metal tools, the understanding of the stars, and the ability to heal diseases through secret knowledge would have appeared as divine grace. It is only as the violence escalates and the giants begin to dominate the landscape that the true cost of this knowledge becomes apparent. The gifts of the Watchers are a double-edged sword. For every advancement in medicine, there is a new poison. For every new tool, there is a new weapon. The documentary gaze lingers on the ruins of the ancient world, searching for the fingerprints of this forbidden history. If these events occurred, they left an indelible mark on the collective memory of our species. The stories of the fallen ones and their hybrid children are woven into the mythologies of nearly every ancient culture, from the Titans of Greece to the Rakshasas of India. They all speak of a time when the sky descended to the earth and changed the course of human destiny forever. The Watchers are no longer just observers. They are participants, architects, and ultimately prisoners of the world they have helped to create. Their descent from the firmament is the first act in a drama that will lead to the complete cleansing of the world. As the corruption spreads, the true rulers of the heavens take notice. The cries of the oppressed earth reach the higher spheres, and the stage is set for a confrontation between the original divine order and the rebels of Mount Hermon. The shadow of the Watchers grows long over the valleys of the earth, a shadow that persists in our legends and perhaps in the very foundations of our civilization. The forbidden history is no longer a secret. It is a warning, etched into the ancient stone and preserved in the scrolls of a long-forgotten prophet. The sun hangs heavy over the desolate plains of modern Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers wind like silver veins through the sun-bleached silt. This is the cradle of civilization, the site of ancient Mesopotamia. Long before the ink dried on the earliest scrolls of the Hebrew Bible, a different kind of record was being pressed into wet clay. These were the chronicles of the Sumerians, the first people to build cities, the first to codify laws, and the first to record a history that suggests humanity was never alone. To understand the mysteries found in the Book of Enoch, one must look backward into the deeper layers of time, where the figures known as the Watchers and the Nephilim find their original echoes in the stories of the Anunnaki. In the mid-19th century, archaeologists unearthed the ruins of Nineveh, and within the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, they discovered thousands of broken clay tablets. As these fragments were pieced together and translated, a chilling realization emerged. The biblical stories of the creation, the fall of man, and the great flood were not unique. They were part of a much older, more complex narrative tradition that had existed for thousands of years before the Book of Enoch was ever compiled. At the heart of this tradition are the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. The parallels between the Enochian literature and the Sumerian king lists are striking. In the Book of Genesis and the Book of Enoch, Enoch is the seventh patriarch in the line of Seth, a figure who walked with God and was taken by him. In the Sumerian tradition, the seventh king before the Great Flood is a man named Enmeduranki. He was the king of the city of Sippar, a place dedicated to the sun god Shamash. Much like Enoch, the Sumerian records state that Enmeduranki was brought into the assembly of the gods. He was shown the secrets of the heavens and the earth, and he was taught the arts of divination, the interpretation of omens, and the movements of the celestial bodies. He was the keeper of divine secrets, a mortal bridge between the mundane and the celestial. When we compare the two figures, we see more than just a coincidence. We see a structural blueprint. The journey Enoch takes through the celestial realms, guided by angels who show him the storehouses of the winds and the paths of the stars, is a direct literary descendant of the initiation of the Sumerian priest kings. Both traditions describe a world where the boundary between the human and the divine is porous, and where specific individuals are chosen to receive the forbidden data of the cosmos. But who were the beings providing this information? In the Book of Enoch, they are the Watchers, the rebellious angels who descend upon Mount Hermon. In the Sumerian texts, they are the Anunnaki and their subservient counterparts, the Apkallu. The Apkallu are described as 7 sages, often depicted as winged figures or men dressed in fish skins, who brought the arts of civilization to humanity. However, just as the Watchers in Enoch are eventually viewed as a source of corruption, the Sumerian myths also hint at a complicated relationship with these bringers of knowledge. The Watchers are accused of teaching mankind things they were not meant to know. They revealed the secrets of metallurgy, the forging of swords and shields, and the crafting of jewelry. They taught women the art of beautifying the eyes with antimony and the use of precious stones to color the skin. They explained the cycles of the moon, the signs of the zodiac, and the properties of roots and herbs. In the Enochian view, this was a violation of the natural order. It was a spiritual contamination. When we turn to the Sumerian records, we find these same technologies attributed to the gods. The god Enki, the lord of the deep waters and the master of wisdom, is often credited with organizing the world and giving humans the tools for survival. But there is a tension here that mirrors the Enochian tragedy. The Sumerian tablets describe the gods as being temperamental and easily angered by the noise of humanity. While Enki is the protector of mankind, his brother Enlil views the burgeoning human population as a nuisance to be managed or destroyed. The most terrifying intersection of these two traditions lies in the creation of the giants. The Book of Enoch describes the Nephilim as the monstrous offspring of the Watchers and human women, creatures of immense size and insatiable appetite who began to devour the resources of the earth and eventually turned on humanity itself. This hybridization is often dismissed as pure mythology, but the Sumerian texts speak of demigods, heroes of old, and kings who were 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, was such a being. He was a giant in stature, possessing strength that no ordinary man could match, and he was driven by a restless, divine spark that made him both a savior and a tyrant to his people. The Sumerian blueprint suggests that the era before the flood was a time of biological and technological experimentation. The Anunnaki were not merely distant observers. They were active participants in the genetic and cultural development of the human race. The forbidden history revealed in the Book of Enoch is essentially a retelling of this period from the perspective of a culture that had come to fear the influence of these foreign entities. Where the Sumerians saw the Apkallu as the foundations of culture, the Enochian authors saw them as the architects of human ruin. This alignment extends to the very reason for the Great Deluge. In the Book of Enoch, the flood is a divine cleansing, a necessary intervention to wipe the earth of the bloodline of the giants and the corruption of the Watchers. In the Sumerian Atrahasis epic, the flood is also a deliberate act of the gods. Enlil, frustrated by the clamor of mankind, decides to exterminate the human race. However, the god Enki, acting in secret, warns his favored servant Ziusadra to build a boat and save the seed of all living things. The parallels are too precise to be ignored. The dimensions of the vessel, the release of the birds to find dry land, and the eventual landing on a mountain peak are all details that appear in the Sumerian account long before they were written in the Hebrew tradition. This suggests that the Book of Enoch is not just a work of religious fantasy, but a repository of a much older collective memory. It is a memory of a time when the sky opened and a superior intelligence descended to intervene in the human story. If we view the Watchers through the lens of the Anunnaki, the narrative shifts from the theological to the historical. We begin to see the Watchers not as demons in the modern sense, but as a faction of a more advanced group who broke protocol. Their crime was not just a moral transgression, it was a political and scientific one. By giving mankind the secrets of the heavens, they accelerated human development in a way that the higher councils of the gods found dangerous. They weaponized a species that was not yet ready for the responsibility of such power. The Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki as having a hierarchy, with leaders who presided over various aspects of the earth and the heavens. They had their own disputes, their own wars, and their own laws. When the Book of Enoch describes the judgment of the Watchers, where they are bound in the valleys of the earth until the day of their final punishment, it echoes the Sumerian accounts of gods being banished to the underworld or stripped of their status after failing the High Council. As we analyze the texts, we find that the very names used in Enoch may have Sumerian roots. The term Nephilim is often translated as those who have fallen, but it can also imply those who have been cast down. This mirrors the status of the lower gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon who were tasked with the hard labor of the earth before they eventually rebelled. The story of Enoch, therefore, serves as a bridge. It connects the fragmented memories of the ancient Near East with the moral and prophetic world of the later biblical era. The landscape of Mesopotamia today is a graveyard of empires, where the winds howl through the arches of Ctesiphon and the dust settles over the buried ziggurats of Ur. But the records left behind in the clay tell a story that will not stay buried. They speak of a blueprint for human civilization that was handed down from above. They speak of a celestial intervention that changed the course of our species forever. When Enoch was taken up into the clouds and shown the mechanics of the universe, he was walking the same path that the Sumerian kings had walked 1,000 years before him. The forbidden history of the Book of Enoch is the hidden history of the Anunnaki. It is a story of how humanity was caught in the middle of a struggle between celestial powers. It is a chronicle of how we were gifted with wisdom, burdened with war, and eventually left to pick up the pieces of a world shattered by the very beings who claim to be our makers. As we look closer at these ancient alignments, the boundary between myth and reality begins to dissolve, leaving us to wonder if the secrets Enoch saw are still hidden in the stars, waiting for the next cycle of history to begin. The blueprint is there, etched in the oldest scripts known to man, waiting for those with the eyes to see and the courage to understand what was truly lost in the waters of the great deep. The evidence points to a single, terrifying conclusion. The events described in Enoch were not localized myths. They were the recorded echoes of a global encounter. From the high mountains of the north to the fertile valleys of the south, the memory of the visitors remained. They were the architects, the teachers, and the judges, and though their names changed from the Anunnaki to the Watchers, their legacy remains the same. It is a legacy of fire and iron, of stars and shadows, a history that was never meant to be forgotten, but was hidden away in the silence of the desert sands. In the quiet halls of the world's great museums, the basalt statues of the Sumerian gods stare out with wide, unblinking eyes. They have seen the rise and fall of countless generations. They have watched as the secrets they allegedly gave to humanity were used to build empires and then to destroy them. The Book of Enoch serves as the final, desperate testimony of that era. It is a window into a time when the heavens were open, and the gods were not distant spirits, but physical presences who walked the earth. By aligning the visions of Enoch with the tablets of Sumer, we do not just find a connection between two ancient cultures. We find the origin story of the modern world. The blueprint is complete, and the forbidden history is finally being revealed. The silence of the ruins is not the silence of the dead, but the silence of the waiting. The story told in the clay and the scroll is a cycle that has not yet reached its end. As the ancient texts are re-examined through the lens of modern understanding, the voices of the Anunnaki and the Watchers speak once more across the gulf of millennia. They remind us that the knowledge we possess was bought at a terrible price, and that the ones who gave it to us may one day return to see how it has been used. The Sumerian blueprint is more than a map of the past. It is a warning for the future, a reminder that we are the heirs to a forbidden legacy that began when the first stars fell to earth. This alignment of traditions suggests that the history we are taught is only a fraction of the truth. Behind the veils of allegory and the masks of gods lies a concrete reality of intervention and observation. Enoch was the witness, the Sumerians were the chroniclers, and we are the result of their shared experience. The forbidden history of the Anunnaki is not just a tale of ancient aliens or fallen angels. It is the story of humanity's first steps toward the light, and the shadows that have followed us ever since. The blueprint remains, fixed in the stars and carved in the stone, a silent witness to the time when heaven and earth were one. As the sun sets over the ruins of Babylon, the shadows lengthen, stretching toward a past that refuses to stay hidden. The journey of Enoch is our own journey, a search for meaning in a world shaped by hands other than our own. The Sumerian blueprint is the key that unlocks the door to this forgotten heritage. In the alignment of these ancient voices, we find the resonance of a truth that transcends time and space. The Watchers are still watching. The Anunnaki are still remembered. And the history they left behind is finally being told. The pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, revealing a picture of our origins that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. The forbidden history is no longer a secret. It is a revelation, waiting for the world to wake up and see the stars for what they truly are. We are the children of the blueprint, the descendants of a divine and dangerous union, and the story is only just beginning. Through the eyes of Enoch and the records of the Sumerians, we see the true face of our past, and in that reflection, we glimpse the possibilities of our future. The ancient world is speaking. It is time for us to listen. The summit of Mount Hermon stands draped in a heavy, unnatural silence. According to the ancient scrolls, this is the site of a profound transgression, a moment when the boundary between the terrestrial and the divine is permanently breached. 200 beings, identified as the Watchers or the Grigori, descend upon this peak. They are led by Samjaza and Azazel, figures whose names will soon become synonymous with both enlightenment and ruin. They do not arrive as conquerors with fire and sword, but as tutors of the forbidden. They bring with them the secrets of the heavens, a curriculum of celestial arts that humanity is not yet destined to possess. This is the dawn of forbidden gnosis, a period where the slow, organic evolution of human culture is violently accelerated by external, high intelligence. In the valley below, the human experience is one of simplicity and survival. Man works the soil, tracks the seasons by instinct, and lives within the limitations of the natural world. But the arrival of the Watchers changes everything. The Book of Enoch describes a systematic dissemination of knowledge that mirrors the Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki and the 7 sages who brought civilization to the Fertile Crescent. This is not the gradual discovery of fire or the wheel. This is the sudden injection of advanced technology and complex metaphysical systems into a primitive society. Azazel, a primary leader among the fallen, begins with the most transformative and destructive of these arts, metallurgy. He teaches the men how to extract metals from the heart of the earth and how to refine them. Under his guidance, the hammer and the anvil become the new altars of human industry. He shows them the secrets of the sword, the knife, the shield, and the breastplate. For the first time, the concept of warfare shifts from tribal skirmishes with wooden clubs to the cold, efficient lethality of tempered steel. The documentary evidence of this shift is visible in the archaeological record, where the sudden appearance of sophisticated weaponry often precedes the rise of empire and the fall of peaceful agrarian societies. But Azazel does not stop with the tools of death. He introduces the arts of artifice and vanity. He teaches the making of bracelets and ornaments, the use of precious stones, and the application of beautifying powders. He instructs humanity in the coloring of the eyelashes and the use of all kinds of costly stones and coloring tinctures. To the modern observer, this may seem trivial compared to the invention of the sword, but the Book of Enoch views this as a profound spiritual corruption. It represents the birth of deception and the manipulation of the self. By altering their appearance, humans learn to mask their true nature, creating a world of surface and shadow where the internal reality is hidden behind a gilded facade. This art of cosmetics is seen as a betrayal of the natural order, a way to mimic the radiance of the divine through artificial means. While Azazel focuses on the material and the physical, Samjaza and his cohorts delve into the secrets of the spirit and the earth. Samjaza is credited with teaching the art of enchantments and root cuttings. This is the beginning of what we might call pharmacology and sorcery combined. Humans are shown which plants hold the power to heal and which hold the power to kill. They are taught the incantations required to bend the will of others or to call upon unseen forces. This knowledge creates a new class of individuals, the sorcerers and the medicine men, who hold a power over their peers that is not derived from physical strength but from secret, celestial data. The natural world is no longer a mystery to be respected, but a resource to be exploited through the hidden properties revealed by the Watchers. The curriculum of the fallen continues with an obsession for the stars. Each of the leaders is a specialist in a particular branch of celestial science. Armoros teaches the resolving of enchantments. Barakil teaches astrology. Kokabeel reveals the secrets of the constellations. Ezekiel instructs in the knowledge of the clouds. Erekil teaches the signs of the earth, while Samsapil explains the signs of the sun and Sahariel details the course of the moon. This is not the gentle observation of the sky by a curious shepherd. This is a rigorous, mathematical system of divination and timing. By teaching astrology and the courses of the celestial bodies, the Watchers hand humanity the keys to the calendar and the map of destiny. They show how the movements of the planets correlate with the fates of kings and the outcomes of harvests. This creates a psychological shift in the human species. Time is no longer a circular flow of seasons, but a structured grid that can be predicted and manipulated. The heavens are no longer a distant, unreachable realm of the gods, but a complex machinery that can be read like a book. However, the Book of Enoch warns that this knowledge is stolen. It is a fragmented version of a higher truth, given to a species that lacks the moral and spiritual maturity to use it wisely. The parallels between these Enochian accounts and the Sumerian tablets are striking. In the Mesopotamian myths, the Anunnaki are responsible for giving the me to humanity. The me are divine decrees, the foundational blueprints of civilization, including everything from the art of writing and weaving to the institutions of kingship and priesthood. Enki, the god of wisdom, is often seen as the benefactor who provides these gifts, much like the Watchers of the biblical tradition. Yet, in both traditions, there is an underlying sense of unease. The gift of civilization is a double-edged sword. It brings sophistication, but it also brings hierarchy, oppression, and the loss of a primordial innocence. As these celestial arts take root, the landscape of the earth begins to change. The quiet rhythms of the prehistoric world are replaced by the clamor of the forge and the chanting of the sorcerer. The city-state begins to emerge, fueled by the new technologies of war and agriculture. The Watchers look down upon their work, seeing a world that is becoming a reflection of their own complex and rebellious natures. They have created a hybrid culture, one that is half human and half divine, built upon foundation stones of forbidden knowledge. The narrator observes that this period represents a fundamental pivot in the human story. We see the transition from the hunter-gatherer to the architect of empires. But the cost is immense. The Book of Enoch describes a world that is becoming increasingly polluted, not just physically, but spiritually. The blood of the innocent begins to cry out from the ground as the new weapons are put to use. The deception taught by Azazel leads to a breakdown of trust and the rise of a society based on appearances and power dynamics. The very fabric of reality seems to be fraying under the weight of these unnatural revelations. There is a cinematic quality to this descent into chaos. One can imagine the flicker of the first great furnaces casting long, distorted shadows across the faces of the first smiths. One can envision the first astronomers staring at the night sky, their eyes wide with a terrifying new understanding of the infinite. They are no longer looking at lights in the dark. They are looking at the gears of a cosmic engine they were never meant to operate. The forbidden gnosis has been planted, and its roots are growing deep into the psyche of man. The Watchers have succeeded in their mission to transform the earth, but in doing so, they have set a collision course with the higher authorities of the universe. The knowledge they have imparted cannot be unlearned. The sword cannot be beaten back into the plowshare without the memory of its edge remains. The cosmetics cannot be washed away without the vanity remaining. Humanity is now a species in possession of godlike powers but burdened by mortal flaws. This tension creates a volatile environment where the progress of civilization is inextricably linked to the potential for total annihilation. The Earth itself begins to groan under the burden of this accelerated evolution. The natural balance is disrupted as humans use their newfound sorcery to dominate the flora and fauna. The harmony that once existed between man and the divine is replaced by a desperate, grasping desire for more. More power, more longevity, more beauty, and more control over the elements. The Watchers have not just taught man how to build, they have taught man how to want. This desire is the fuel for the fires of the coming age, an age defined by the struggle between those who hold the secrets and those who are ruled by them. As the sun sets over Mount Hermon, the shadows of the 200 grow long across the world. The arts they taught are flourishing, and the first great cities of the antediluvian world are rising from the dust. The transformation is complete. The forbidden gnosis is no longer a secret held by a few. It is the very foundation of the new human reality. The stage is prepared for the next and most devastating chapter of this forbidden history. The gifts of the Watchers have been accepted, but the price for this enlightenment is about to be demanded in full. The air is thick with the anticipation of judgment, as the celestial hierarchy prepares to respond to the desecration of the natural order. Humanity stands at the peak of its newfound power, unaware that the very knowledge that raised them up is about to become the instrument of their undoing. The transition from a state of enlightenment to a state of absolute terror begins with the sound of a heartbeat that does not belong to the natural world. In the valleys of the ancient Near East, the forbidden union between the celestial watchers and the daughters of men yields a biological consequence that neither heaven nor earth is prepared to sustain. These are not merely children of two different cultures or tribes. They are a radical departure from the blueprint of terrestrial life. The Book of Enoch describes their emergence as a catastrophic arrival, a breach of the divine order that manifests in the physical forms of the Nephilim. To look upon them is to witness a violation of scale. While their mothers are human, the genetic architecture of their fathers, the fallen Anunnaki, infuses these hybrids with a vitality and a physical presence that defies the limitations of the human frame. They grow with a speed that is unnatural, their bodies expanding until they dwarf the cities that once sheltered them. The ancient texts speak of heights that seem impossible to the modern mind, describing beings who reach 3,000 ells, a measurement that suggests a scale so massive it would make them living mountains of flesh and bone. Whether these numbers are literal or metaphorical, the message remains consistent across all ancient accounts. The Nephilim are a biological anomaly, a sudden and violent insertion of alien power into the delicate ecology of the earth. As these giants reach maturity, the initial wonder felt by humanity turns to a cold, paralyzing dread. The gifts of the Watchers, the metalworking, the enchantments, and the star charts are now overshadowed by the sheer physical requirements of their offspring. The Nephilim are born with an insatiable hunger, a metabolic demand that the primitive agriculture of the time cannot satisfy. At first, the giants consume the produce of the fields. They take the grain, the fruit, and the livestock of the human communities. Within a few short seasons, the surplus of entire civilizations is devoured. The storehouses are emptied. The cattle are slaughtered by the thousands. The fields are stripped bare until the soil itself is exhausted. The documentary of this era, if it were captured in stone, would show a world tilting into ecological collapse. The equilibrium of the planet is shattered by these massive apex predators who occupy no natural place in the food chain. When the earth can no longer provide enough greenery or livestock to fill their bellies, the Nephilim turn their sights toward the very humans who birthed their race. The protector becomes the predator. The giants begin to hunt humanity. The Book of Enoch paints a harrowing picture of this transition. It describes the Nephilim turning against mankind and even against one another. The world becomes a landscape of carnage. The giants devour the flesh of men and drink their blood, a detail that marks a profound spiritual and biological transgression in ancient thought. This is the biological breach in its most visceral form. The sacred boundary between life and death, between the eater and the eaten, is dissolved in an orgy of consumption. The screams of the dying echo in the valleys, but there is no authority on earth capable of stopping these titans. They are the masters of the physical world, wielding the strength of gods and the appetites of monsters. But the corruption does not stop with the consumption of human flesh. The Watchers, seeing the chaos their offspring have wrought, do not retreat or repent. Instead, they delve deeper into their forbidden science. The biological breach expands to include the entire animal kingdom. The texts suggest that the fallen ones begin to experiment with the genetic fabric of the earth itself. They sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. This cryptic passage from Enoch points toward a horrifying reality of ancient bioengineering or hybridization. The Anunnaki possess knowledge of the secrets of life, and in their rebellion, they begin to mix the species. They create chimeras, monsters of multiple forms that walk, crawl, and fly through a world that is becoming increasingly unrecognizable. This is the true nature of the scourge. It is not just the presence of giants, but the systematic poisoning of the planetary genome. Every living creature is touched by this celestial interference. The purity of the natural world is replaced by a distorted reflection of the Watcher's own inner darkness. The landscape is filled with aberrations, creatures that should not exist, and beings that suffer from their own unnatural existence. The earth itself begins to groan under the weight of this biological tyranny. The narrator of the ancient scrolls suggests that the very ground cries out, a poetic expression of a planet in the throes of a total systemic failure. The social structure of humanity disintegrates. The kings and priests who once welcomed the Anunnaki as gods now find themselves hiding in the dark corners of the earth, watching as their civilizations are dismantled by the very beings they worshipped. The technology given to them, the swords and the shields, are useless against the Nephilim. A blade of bronze or even the earliest iron cannot pierce the hide of a creature that stands hundreds of feet tall. The enchantments taught to the women are no defense against the raw, primordial hunger of the giants. Humanity is reduced to a resource, a source of labor and a source of food. In the midst of this darkness, the Watchers themselves undergo a transformation. They are no longer the bright heralds of celestial wisdom. They have become the warlords of a dying world. They watch their children tear the earth apart, and they do nothing to stop it. Perhaps they cannot stop it. Perhaps the mixing of celestial and terrestrial blood has created a force that even the Anunnaki cannot control. The giants are not just physically large. They possess a portion of the divine spirit, but it is a spirit trapped in a body of base matter, driven by the instincts of a beast. This internal conflict between their godlike heritage and their earthly cravings makes the Nephilim volatile, cruel, and profoundly unstable. The breach is also spiritual. The presence of the Nephilim on the earth creates a metaphysical weight that prevents the human soul from finding peace. The atmosphere of the world is saturated with the violence and the unnatural energy of the hybrids. The prayers of the righteous, if any remain, are drowned out by the roar of the giants and the clatter of the Watchers' forges. The planet has become a laboratory of the grotesque, a place where the laws of nature are suspended in favor of the whims of the fallen. In this era of the scourge, the concept of the forbidden history becomes clear. This is the period that mainstream history has forgotten or perhaps suppressed, because it speaks of a time when the human race was nearly extinguished by a power it did to create and could not comprehend. The myths of every culture, from the Greek Titans to the Norse Jotuns, are the echoes of this biological breach. They all tell of a time when giants walked the earth and brought the world to the brink of ruin. The biological breach is the ultimate crime of the Anunnaki. By mixing the heavens with the earth in a way that was never intended, they have created a deadlock. The earth cannot support the Nephilim, and the Nephilim cannot leave the earth. They are bound together in a dance of destruction. The giants continue to grow, and as they grow, their hunger intensifies. The humans continue to die, and as they die, the labor force required to feed the giants vanishes. The system is cannibalizing itself. The end result of the Anunnaki's interference is not a high-tech utopia or a kingdom of god kings, but a silent, desolate world stripped of life. The Watchers look down from their high places upon the wreckage of their design. They have sought to rule a world, and instead, they have created a graveyard. The biological breach is complete. The purity of the human lineage is compromised. The animals are twisted into monstrosities, and the environment is shattered. The experiment has failed in the most spectacular and horrific way possible. The Nephilim scourge is not just a localized event. It is a planetary infection that threatens to spread across the entire tapestry of creation. As the cries of the suffering reach a crescendo, the silence of the higher heavens is finally broken. The biological breach has reached a point where it can no longer be ignored by the higher authorities of the cosmos. The earth is no longer a garden. It is a wound. And a wound of this magnitude requires a radical, world-altering treatment. The stage is set for a confrontation that will dwarf even the violence of the giants. As the celestial forces that remained loyal to the original order prepare to address the catastrophe unfolding on the terrestrial plane. The era of the Nephilim is reaching its peak, and with that peak comes the shadow of a reckoning that will cleanse the world in a way no one could have anticipated. The cries of the earth rise through the layers of the atmosphere, piercing the veil between the material world and the celestial courts. It is a sound of profound suffering, a collective wail from a creation that has been distorted and drained by the appetites of the Nephilim and the corruption of the Watchers. In the high places of the heavens, the great archangels Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel look down upon the shifting shadows of the terrestrial plane. They see a world where the natural order has been discarded in favor of a violent and chaotic tyranny. The blood of the innocent stains the soil, and the secrets of the cosmos have been used to forge weapons of unprecedented cruelty. The archangels turn their gaze toward the Most High, serving as witnesses to the catastrophe unfolding below. They report that the earth is filled with blood and unrighteousness, and they ask for a decree that will restore the balance of the universe. The response from the divine throne is absolute and terrifying in its clarity. The era of tolerance for the fallen ones is over. This is the moment where the narrative of the Book of Enoch aligns with the most ancient Sumerian traditions of a cosmic reset, yet it adds a layer of moral judgment and individual accountability that the earlier cuneiform tablets often omit. The archangel Uriel is dispatched to the son of Lamech, the man known as Noah, who remains a solitary figure of integrity in a sea of depravity. Uriel does not come with a mere suggestion, but with a survival directive that will ensure the spark of humanity continues after the coming storm. He instructs Noah on how to preserve his lineage and how to hide himself from the impending wrath, marking the beginning of the end for the antediluvian civilization. While Noah prepares for the literal storm, the archangels receive more violent assignments concerning the Watchers themselves. Raphael is commanded to seize Azazel, the primary instigator of the forbidden arts. In a scene that mirrors the binding of Prometheus in Greek myth or the casting down of rebellious titans, Raphael is told to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. The location specified is a desert place called Dudiel. This is no ordinary prison, but a jagged opening in the earth filled with sharp and pointed rocks. The narrator describes Azazel being covered in darkness, his face hidden so that he may never again see the light of the sun. He is to remain there in the silence of the abyss until the great day of judgment, at which point he will be cast into the fire. This is the ultimate quarantine, a celestial removal of the entity that introduced the tools of war and vanity to the human race. The judgment then turns toward the leader of the Watchers, Samayaza, and his companions who bound themselves by a mutual curse upon Mount Hermon. The Archangel Michael is ordered to inform them of the destruction of their beloved offspring, the Nephilim. The punishment for the Watchers is uniquely psychological and emotional. They are forced to witness the mutual slaughter of their giant sons, watching as the very beings they created out of pride and lust turn their weapons upon one another. The Nephilim, driven by an insatiable hunger and a spirit of violence that they cannot contain, begin to tear their own world apart. The Watchers can only watch in helpless agony as their legacy is erased in a frenzy of fratricidal warfare. This is the first phase of the cleansing, the removal of the hybrid giants from the surface of the earth. Once the Nephilim have fallen by their own hands, the Watchers are seized. They are bound fast for 70 generations under the hills of the earth. They are to be held in this subterranean confinement until the day of their consummation, a time when they will be led away to the abyss of fire and to the torment and the prison in which they will be confined forever. This description of the fallen angels bound beneath the earth offers a striking parallel to the Sumerian concept of the Kur or the underworld, where ancient, powerful entities dwell in a state of stasis. It suggests that the very foundations of the world are built upon the prisons of these former celestial masters. The mountains we walk upon and the valleys we inhabit are, according to the Enochian tradition, the heavy seals placed upon the tombs of the living gods. As the Watchers are dragged into the depths, the physical environment of the earth begins to change. The celestial decree for the deluge is not merely a weather event, but a fundamental breaking of the boundaries between the various waters of the cosmos. In the ancient worldview, the earth exists between the waters above the firmament and the waters below the crust. The deluge is the moment these barriers are removed. The windows of heaven are opened, and the fountains of the great deep burst forth. It is a total immersion of the planet, an act of cosmic baptism intended to wash away the genetic and spiritual pollution introduced by the fallen ones. The water does not just fall from the clouds, it surges from the fractured crust of the earth itself, rising with a relentless and terrifying speed that swallows the citadels of the Nephilim and the monuments of the Watchers. The cinematic scale of this destruction is difficult to overstate. The great cities built with forbidden knowledge, the temples dedicated to the celestial rebels, and the vast laboratories of alchemical experimentation are all claimed by the rising tide. The giants, despite their immense strength and their prowess in battle, find no defense against the rising ocean. There is no high ground high enough to escape the reach of the celestial judgment. The narrative portrays a world being folded back into its primordial state of chaos. The distinctions between land and sea vanish, and the screams of a dying civilization are silenced by the roar of the cataracts. It is a moment of absolute stillness in the midst of absolute violence. The narrator observes that this is not an act of blind anger, but a calculated surgical operation. The world has become infected by a corruption that is not just moral, but biological and metaphysical. The interbreeding of the divine and the human has created a hybridity that threatens the very fabric of existence. The deluge is the method by which the original template of life is recovered. By wiping the slate clean, The Most High ensures that the seeds of the future will be planted in a soil that is no longer saturated with the influence of the fallen. Noah and his family, floating within the ark, become the living bridge between the old world and the new, carrying the blueprint of a humanity that is meant to walk a different path. The binding of the fallen and the flooding of the earth serve as the twin pillars of this celestial reckoning. One addresses the source of the corruption, while the other addresses the manifestation of that corruption on the physical plane. The Watchers are locked away in the darkness of the earth, their power stripped and their voices silenced. The giants are returned to the dust from which they were never meant to rise, and the earth itself is scrubbed by the relentless pressure of the deep. For 40 days and 40 nights, the world is a sphere of water, a silent orb rotating in the void, waiting for the command to begin again. This transition from the chaotic world of the Nephilim to the silent world of the flood marks a profound shift in the Enochian narrative. It is the end of the age of the Titans and the beginning of the age of the hidden history. The secrets that the Watchers taught, the metalwork, the enchantments, and the astrology are buried under miles of sediment and water. They become the forbidden archaeology of a lost era, fragments of a time before the world as we know it was born. The narrator emphasizes that while the water eventually recedes, the memory of what was lost remains a haunting presence in the collective psyche of mankind. As the mountain peaks finally begin to emerge from the receding waves, the world that greets the survivors is unrecognizable. The lush, vibrant landscapes of the antediluvian era have been replaced by a raw and rugged terrain. The atmosphere itself feels different. The weight of the celestial rebellion has been lifted, but it has been replaced by the solemnity of a world that has seen its own destruction. The Watchers remain in their deep prisons, and the spirits of the Nephilim, though their bodies are gone, are said to linger as disembodied shadows, a lingering reminder of the forbidden history that was once written in blood across the face of the earth. The judgment is complete, but the story of how these events shaped the destiny of humanity is only just beginning to be understood through the lens of the Book of Enoch. The deluge was not just a flood of water, it was a flood of consequence, and its ripples are still felt in the traditions and mysteries that have survived into the modern age. The shadows of history are often long and deliberate. In the centuries following the emergence of early Christianity, a profound silence begins to fall over certain ancient texts. Among the most significant of these is the Book of Enoch. Once a foundational pillar of both Jewish and early Christian thought, this expansive work suddenly vanishes from the accepted canon of the Western world. To understand why this happens is to understand the struggle over who controls the narrative of the human past. The suppression of this history was not just about theology. It was about the control of human identity. If humanity is told that its progress is entirely its own, or entirely the gift of a distant and singular deity, the narrative is easy to manage. But if humanity is the product of an intervention, a hybrid of earthly evolution and celestial interference, the story becomes much more complicated. It suggests that there are layers to our reality that we are not meant to see. The silenced canon represents a bridge between the mythological past and a potential hidden reality. The preservation of the Book of Enoch in Ethiopia and its eventual rediscovery at the Dead Sea act as a testament to the resilience of suppressed information. It serves as a reminder that what is considered forbidden today may simply be the forgotten truth of yesterday. As we look at these ancient pages, we see a reflection of a time when the heavens were not empty and the gods were not distant. We see the records of a world where the Anunnaki and the Watchers were real actors on the stage of history. The scrolls tell us that the past is far more complex and far more mysterious than the official records would have us believe. The forbidden history was never truly erased. It was merely waiting in the darkness, preserved in the dust of caves and the remote monasteries of the mountains, waiting for a generation that was ready to look again at the stars and ask who really brought the light of civilization to the shadows of the earth. The weight of this recovered knowledge forces a reevaluation of all we know. If the Book of Enoch is accurate in its antiquity, then its accounts of the giants, the celestial teachers, and the ancient technology must be taken seriously. We are forced to confront the possibility that our ancestors were witnesses to events that modern science and traditional religion are only now beginning to reconcile. The canon may have been silenced for 1,000 years, but the voices of the watchers continue to echo through the corridors of time, demanding to be heard. This segment of history is not just about a book. It is about the survival of a memory. It is about the refusal of the human spirit to let the most provocative chapters of its origin story be deleted. As the sun sets over the ruins of Qumran and the bells toll in the churches of Aksum, the forbidden history remains, etched into the very fabric of our oldest stories, reminding us that some truths are too powerful to stay buried forever. The echoes of the Anunnaki are found not just in the clay of Sumer, but in the very ink of the silent scrolls, waiting to reveal the true nature of our beginnings. The story of the silenced canon is a story of resistance. It is the story of how a single narrative was nearly lost to the fires of censorship and the passage of time. Yet, like the Nephilim themselves, the Book of Enoch proved too large to be hidden. It stood as a titan among texts, casting a shadow that reached from the ancient mountains of Ethiopia to the modern laboratories of textual analysis. Every verse recovered is a piece of a puzzle that points toward a forgotten era of interaction between humanity and the inhabitants of the heavens. The forbidden history is no longer a secret kept by the few. It is a legacy that belongs to everyone willing to look beyond the boundaries of the accepted path. The silence has ended, and in its place, a new conversation begins about who we are, where we came from, and who really walked the earth in the days before the world was washed clean. The ripples of the deluge have finally carried these ancient words back to our shores, and the history they reveal is as breathtaking as it is forbidden. This is the enduring power of the silenced canon. It is the voice of the ancient world, refusing to be forgotten. It is the revelation of a history that was meant to be lost, but was instead preserved for a time when we might finally be ready to understand its true meaning. The era of silence is over. The era of the Book of Enoch, and the truth of the Anunnaki it reflects, has only just begun to speak to the modern soul.